Today, we enter a world of gods and monsters. We're taking a look at the NECA Universal Monsters.
The Bride of Frankenstein.
I don't remember when this figure was supposed to come out, but it seems like the floodgates opened on this figure in just about the last week as of the time I'm recording this. I started seeing one or two people finding it, and then I was at a convention over the weekend. I found a couple different vendors selling it, and saw people even reporting they were finding it at Target already, which seems to be very odd now. It seems usually people, find things at Target months after its initial release. And I was about to say this is one I was looking forward to, but I feel like I say that about every one of these Universal Monsters figures. I've been a Universal Monsters fan since I was a little kid, and it just makes me happy every time we get one of these in plastic form. This is another character that we did also get in the Diamond Select, Universal Select line, so we will be able to do some comparisons there as well. But let's not waste too much time here and go ahead and take a closer look at the figure itself. The Bride comes with two separate sets of hands. I believe this is less than any of the other Universal Monsters figures. I think we've on average gotten 3 sets of hands with every figure. However, the Bride is on screen for a very short amount of time and only appears in one of the original Universal horror movies, so it may be excusable that we didn't get a ton of different hand options. What we got, I think, is completely sufficient for her. We have kind of a flattened hand where all the fingers are together, and then we have more of a spread out hand. This is really about the extent of the hands that she makes in terms of gestures throughout the movie, so I think this works just fine. In terms of detail, they're pretty similar top and bottom. They are just hands wrapped in bandages. The bandage texture is pretty nicely done. I will say, and I guess I'll start here with it, I'm not a huge fan of the coloration of the bandages throughout this entire figure. I think overall it just comes off a little waxy. It's nothing ruinous, but I kind of wish it was a little more of a matte finish on it as opposed to this kind of semi-gloss they put on it. We also get 2 little bandage coils. These are made of soft rubber, and you can put them over her arm. I believe in the movie they are on her right arm where you see it kind of coming unbandaged. So the smaller one I think should go around her wrist, and the larger one would go kind of around her elbow area. I think these work pretty well as an effect. Obviously, it's not going to be seamless because they are separate pieces to the figure, but on the plus side, it actually does kind of help cover up the gaps made by articulation, so it kind of smooths out some of those areas. And I was kind of trying to wait before putting her into her full dress here, but I did want to recreate the scene a little more faithfully. I don't have a screenshot of it up or anything, so this is not probably exactly how she's posed, but it is a little more something like this when you actually do see it coming undone. So that gives you that full effect. In terms of head sculpts, we have 3 options. The first is her bandage look that we saw earlier in this video. It's pretty nicely done. We see her eyes kind of sunken in there, just revealed behind that one little strip. The rest of it is just covered in bandages, obscuring the rest of her face, but you can tell the shapes. You can see the nose, the chin, all that. She does have the staples going across the forehead there. Turn around to the side, you can see the continuation of the bandages going around. They have a nice kind of wrapping effect happening there. More of the same going on in the back, and then on the other side of her face. One thing I did note when looking at this is there looks to be a seam around kind of where the staples are on top of her head and where her eyes are, which makes this last piece feel like it should actually interchange. But from the best of what I could tell, this last little effects piece is just meant to sit right over her existing face. So this is the fully bandaged look right after they create the monster, the Bride. It has some more staples. It kind of mimics those staples across the top of her head in the wrap, and then some lower ones down. It completely obscures her eyes there. But if we turn it to the side, you can see it does stick out noticeably. And I also thought from the way the head was sculpted that this was supposed to be, you take out the piece with the staples across the forehead and her eyes, and then replace it with this, but I don't see a way to do that, and it sits on this pretty snugly. There's an indentation on the inside for the nose to go into, so I fully expect that it is supposed to be this extra layer, this bulkier piece, which is a bit of a bummer, because I think it would have been cool for it to be a little more streamlined, but this is fine. Another piece that's from a very, very specific shot, and then I believe you only ever see her head on like this anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Her 2 other head sculpts are the much more iconic head with the beehive hairdo. The details on the face are nice. This once again continues on that kind of 3D printed feel that they've done with all these Universal Monster heads. Like, it has this weird level of smoothness that's also simultaneously a bit grainy that makes me feel like you can kind of tell it's a 3D printed piece. But here I think it works pretty well. The texture in the hair is nice. I know that some people were upset that they gave her brown hair. I think that is accurate to at least Universal's colorized images of the character, but I know most people are very used to it being black hair, so it does feel a bit weird. The detail around the eyes and the mouth is pretty nice. One thing I'm noticing here that I'd never noticed before is that the brown streaks are not even on her head, and that does appear to be accurate to the movie. Actually, if we turn her to the one side, we can see this one is a little lower down where it starts, and it is a bit of a skinnier streak going up. You can also see the detailing on her ear there, and her neck. The neck and the head are connected, and it goes down to about the clavicles, as opposed to being like a peg that goes into the neck. This was done to allow it to keep that bandaged look versus the unbandaged look, so it actually works out pretty well here. Nothing too much to talk about on the back of the head. And then if we go to her other side, we see that stripe does start a little higher up, and it is a bit thicker than the other one. We can also see there is the scar going down the side of her head next to her ear, and if we tilt the neck up, you can see the additional scar going across her neck. And she does have the scar going across her chin as well. It's just a little hard to see based on how the figure is made and how the articulation puts her head. And just to explain the way the head connects a little better, I'll show her without the head real quick here, and then we'll bring in that last head sculpt. So this, of course, is the kind of screaming head sculpt. Similar in detail in terms of everything else to the other one, but just with the open screaming mouth. I guess this does work for the hissing face, the infamous like screeching at the monster. I think it's just that having it in normal lighting like this kind of takes away from that effect. It is a very heavily shadowed scene, so we do lose a little bit of that in translation, I think. But overall, it is nice. It has a lot of the same detail. Give it a turn here. You can also see those scars going on underneath her head. The stripes are detailed in her hair as well. And I don't think she was falling, but then I tried to catch her and made things worse. And then there's the back of her head as well. In terms of the detail on the body, there's not a whole lot to talk about. It's mostly that bandaged look. As I mentioned before, there is the kind of waxy coating on this thing, or waxy finish on it, that I'm not a huge fan of. Not a whole lot of color variation going on here too. I think that adds to my disappointment with all that. But the actual sculpt looks good. We do have the kind of staples or clips there right above her chest, holding those bandages on. In the movie, there was one a little further towards her right shoulder, but I think that gets lost because of the articulation, and it's not like a major detail anyway. Bring it around to the arms, we could see more of that going on there. More of the same going on in the back, and then there's her other side. As for the legs, it's a lot of the same. I should also mention that I think both her upper and lower torso are rubberized on this figure for articulation purposes. And I'll get a little more into that in just a minute. I'll just do a quick turnaround here of the lower body. I feel lame not commenting on much of this, but there's really not a whole lot to talk about. It is kind of bland, honestly. I mean, it's accurate, it is what it needs to be, but it just isn't anything super interesting. Should also be noted that she has bandage texture on the bottom of her feet and no peg hole. I think this is a figure that could have benefited greatly from a peg hole, even though she's been able to stand decently well during this review. I think it would have been nice, especially because her feet are really hidden under that dress, so you could have hidden a stand really easily with her, so I'm kind of missing that we don't have one there. So to put the dress on, I think it's easier to take the head off. I also think if you have the spread out hands, you should probably take them off. The closed hands are pretty easy enough to get through the holes in the dress, so I'm not as worried about that. And what I've been doing is just taking the figure's arms and putting them above her head, and then just sliding the dress down over that. I had to do it off camera because it was a little hard to line everything up. I don't want to risk tearing this because it's not a very thick material. It actually feels like it's the same stuff they made that blanket that came with the accessory set for Frankenstein's monster. It's like that same material, so I don't really expect this is the most durable substance on the planet. Now earlier when I was trying to swap out some pieces, I was trying to put the head on when the figure was like this, but because these shoulder pads are rubber, they actually kind of compress in over where the head pegs into the body, so you can't actually get the head on with her arms up. So it's important to note that these kind of need to go back down, and then you can make some adjustments there as well to kind of get everything lined back up, and then you could pop the head into there. You'll probably have to mess with it a little bit to, get the dress out from under her neck. And then thankfully this dress is made of that stretchy material, so it actually does kind of, it's a little forgiving if you do trap it while putting the head on. So I would just recommend being careful. You can see it's a little frayed on the one sleeve of mine on the right hand side of the screen. It was actually like that out of the box. That's not my fault, I swear. But I think it is something you want to be careful with, and I wouldn't honestly recommend doing this all that often because it doesn't feel like it's going to hold up the best if you do it a million times. So nothing crazy going on in the front. It does look good. It drapes over her nicely, and it's kind of a amorphous blob of a smock in the movie anyway, so it serves its purpose well here. I think I could probably cut these strands off, but I just wanted to leave them on for the review just to show what mine came like out of the box. I have her on this 1, 2, 3 block, so she's standing a bit above the ground here, but you can see the back train of it is a lot longer than the front, so it sits pretty flush against the front of her body and then trails off behind her. And if we turn her fully around, you can see there is the kind of sewing going up the back there, tied off at the top. At first, I was terrified that we were going to have to undo this to take the smock on and off of her, but thankfully that's not the case. It's just there to match what's in the movie, like how they would have put her together. And overall, I think it looks good. It looks like what it's supposed to. We'll do the comparison later, but I do really prefer this than to give us something like made out of rubberized plastic or something like we got with the diamond figure. So I think this is the right way to do it here, and it works as well as it needs to. And then just to give you a more complete view of her actually standing on the ground here, yeah, I think this works really well. Pulling the smock back off for the articulation, I will say I don't think that smock hinders anything here. So all the heads have a ball joint at the top of the head, so they will swivel pretty far up. She'll look a decent amount up, decently down to her chins and her neck. They'll rotate full 360 and they will pivot. So even though it's a little less articulation than our previous Universal Monsters releases, it has a ball joint at either end of the neck, this doesn't really hinder it too much. The arms will rotate forward and back. They will go out to the side. As I mentioned, if you put them all the way up, it will push this rubber bit in and kind of interfere with the neck if the neck's not there. The elbow is a single joint, bend basically about 90 degrees, maybe a little bit past that. It will also rotate. The hands will rotate and hinge up and down. All 4 hands do that same motion. Should also note these hands are rubbery. I didn't realize that before. We have a ball joint at the mid-torso, so she could bend forward and back. Not a huge range of motion, but enough. You can rotate side to side as well as pivot. The legs will kick pretty far forward, not really back at all. They'll go out to the side. We could rotate at the hip. We could bend the knee just shy of 90 degrees there. We could rotate at the knee, and the foot will hinge pretty far down, pretty far up, and we do have a pivot there as well. For a size comparison, here is our NECA Bride next to the Universal Select Bride. I tried to get them in a similar enough pose, even though it's a little bit hard to match it exactly. It should be noted that my Universal Select Bride, I don't know if the head was ever supposed to come off. She has this sculpted body underneath all that, but the neck peg broke in me trying to remove it, so her head is on a weird magnet joint that I kind of cobbled together. So if the head looks a little bobbleheadish, that's probably not Diamond's fault. I do also have her on a little circular base, I think the one that came with the Wolfman, just because she didn't want to stand very well on her own. I think she kind of relies on her dress to balance her. But yeah, I like the proportions on the NECA figure a lot more. I think they're a lot more realistic. The Diamond one kind of has a comic booky feel, like having each breast kind of wrapped individually, and just the shape of her figure is very, very thin and not really as realistic to a human, I guess. Her hair is also much, much larger. And you can see the stripes are more even, and the hair is black, of course. I think the Diamond one matches a lot of artwork. I said comic book earlier. It matches a lot of artwork that exists of the Bride, but I don't think it captures the actual, like, movie character as much as the NECA one, for sure. And then there they both are in their dresses, smocks, whatever you want to call them. And here's where I much prefer the NECA look, because it does drape like fabric, because it is fabric. The Universal Bride, it doesn't even, like, when she's sitting on the ground or on a stand that extends past her feet, it doesn't even sit on her shoulders. It rides above her shoulders, so it just doesn't fit her well in the first place. I also like the NECA's has that more Bride feel, where it is longer in the back, and the Diamond Select one is much more kind of circular around her body. And for a size comparison, there she is with the Invisible Man on her left, another James Whale movie monster, and then there on the right is her, I was going to say her mate, but her potential mate, that doesn't work out so well if you see the movie, of the Frankenstein's monster. And I think the scale here is pretty good between those two. I'm just glad they didn't try to, like, shoehorn in some, like, cheesy, you know, romance thing between the two of them in terms of accessories or anything, because it always weirds me out when I see all these, like, t-shirts and things of like couple goals, and it's the bride and the monster, and it's like, that's not how this movie ends. It's not the only time they've been on screen together in this form. Like, that's not how that goes. And even though I think the Invisible Man is a perfectly suitable human-sized stand-in, I've been using Doc Brown for all these videos, I believe, so far, so I'm just going to throw Doc Brown in to keep up with continuity. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how this figure came out. I think she is pretty nicely detailed. Like, honestly, my only complaint about her is the fact that I don't like the color of the bandages. I think if they would have done a wash on them and maybe changed the finish on them so they weren't so satiny looking, I would have been thrilled with how this thing came out. But overall, it's still a great release in this series, so it definitely gets a high recommend from me. I'm also excited that we are getting a Bride of Frankenstein version of the monster himself. It looks like he's coming with his chair accessories, so they probably repainted some of those RoboCop accessories. But he does have like the burnt clothing and head sculpt and all that. I think he comes with a cigar, among other things. So honestly, some great like scene building pieces that will definitely help with expanding out how we display and photograph these figures, which is awesome. I think next coming in this line is the Phantom of the Opera and Creature from the Black Lagoon. I think those are the ones with release dates announced. Actually, I literally just picked up the Phantom of the Opera today. It is cool that two of these figures hit close in succession, kind of like the Wolfman and the Mummy did. So I have to get on that Phantom of the Opera review sooner than later, but I think I need to revisit that movie before I'm ready to talk about it. So I'll put this one up, watch that, and then hopefully be ready to do that review. Also, Creature from Black Lagoon I think is scheduled for later this summer, and I am very excited about that one. I can't have enough Creature stuff, so I'm literally already planning on buying at least two of them because I realize I want the version of the Creature where he's missing one of his toenails. Is that too far? Probably. But yeah, the Bride gets top marks here. Really like this figure, and I will see you soon with the Phantom of the Opera review. Later.